Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the MCBA Jerome Fellowship Artist Talks featuring our 2019 fellows, Austin Nash, Shun Jie Yong, and collaborative duo Sarah Evenson and Jade Juno. I'd like to invite you all to take a moment to ground yourself from wherever you find yourself in the world. My name is Tori Aaron. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Exhibitions and Artist Programs at Minnesota Center for Book Arts, or MCBA. MCBA is the largest and most comprehensive book art center, celebrating the book as a dynamic contemporary art form that takes many shapes. Our mission is to ignite artistic practice, foster learning and diverse creative communities by creating access to specialized book arts tools, equipment, educational programs, exhibitions, fellowships, and artist residencies. Since 1985, MCBA has partnered with the Jerome Foundation to help early career artists expand the boundaries of contemporary book arts by supporting the creation of new work. Through 14 series of fellowships and 7 series of mentorships, this program has served Minnesota artists in a variety of disciplines, including printmaking, papermaking, bookbinding, painting, sculpture, poetry, filmmaking, and more. Thank you to the Jerome Foundation and specifically to Lan Briel and Eleanor Savage for all of their support. The Jerome Fellow cohort has been through a specifically difficult year through the COVID-19 pandemic and the largest civil rights movement in our country's history. Jade, Austin, Shun, and Sarah have shown incredible resilience in the face of uncertainty. They have transformed and expanded their projects in vibration with the many challenges society faces today, showing great courage in their own unique artistic voices. Looking ahead, we are hopeful that the fellows will be installing their culminating exhibition at MCBA from October 28th through January 2nd, 2022 in our main gallery. We hope that you can join us. And before we get started, I'd like to welcome participants to include any questions that they may have in the chat for the Q&A after all of the fellows have presented their work. Now I'd like to introduce Sarah Evenson and Jade Juno. Sarah and Jade are gender variant artists working collaboratively under the name Rum Tum. Together, they create zines, prints, and posters celebrating the joy and playfulness of queer identity. Thanks so much, Sarah. Looking forward to your presentation.
We would like to begin by thanking Tori and the rest of the staff at MCBA for their guidance throughout the fellowship and for hosting us tonight.
We would also like to thank the Jerome Foundation for sponsoring this generous fellowship that has made so much possible for us this last year and a half. We deeply appreciate it.
Next, we would like to introduce ourselves and give you a taste of our own individual practices. My name is Sarah Evenson, and I use the pronouns they, them, theirs. I am a genderqueer artist with a background in traditional book arts and printmaking. Since receiving my BFA, I found work as a freelance commercial illustrator while also developing my own print, illustration, comics, teaching, writing, and zine practice. I have gravitated towards zines as a form of book art because they are financially accessible both to create and to collect, and they also integrate my love of illustration and writing while still taking into account the things that I really enjoyed in studying about the book as a form, i.e. physicality, sequence, the multiple, and distribution as activation. That reliance on a reader and a readership base and circulation in order for printing and print media in general to have power as an art form has always been really interesting to me. Subject matter-wise, my zines and my prints in my personal practice often explore how we read images through cultural lenses in a playful way, and how the interplay of text and image produces narratives when considered as a single unit by a reader or viewer. I see the interaction and subjectivity of the viewer as being essential to the often culturally specific contextualization that's at the core of my work. And I am often, though definitely not always, told by viewers and readers that my work is funny, or it makes them laugh, or that it surprised them. And I pursue this route because I truly believe that humor is a form of social critique, and that laughter can be deployed as a subversive antagonist against power structures of all kinds.
Okay, so my name is Jade Juno. I use the pronouns they, them. I'm an artist and maker with a focus in drawing and painting. I studied at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, where I earned my BFA in illustration. And post-graduation, I sought out a mix of opportunities, from participating in group shows and a solo show to working with commercial clients, as well as assisting in teaching opportunities and mentorships for young local makers. I've also spent time in recent years making gig posters and flyers for local musicians and creating paintings live at events. Currently, I'm really interested in exploring nonlinear narrative techniques and the balance of intent, intuition, and accident while making. My current work inspects themes of queerness, mental and physical confrontation, as well as spaces and those that occupy them.
So that's an intro to the kind of work that we each make separately, but as you can see, and as Tori mentioned, we are doing this presentation together, and that is because we were awarded this fellowship as a collaborative team. When we make work together, we often make it under this name of Rum Tum, and we picked this word to represent us because it's playful and it has these two distinct parts that nonetheless form a rhyming unit. We felt that this represented the way that we wanted our creative collaborative interchange to function. The story of our collaboration starts in late 2017, when we were both kind of at crossroads in our respective practices. I was feeling burned out creatively from several long projects, and I was thinking that I wanted to start building more skills in screen printing, because for traditional printmaking, that form is relatively fast and it allows for a lot of play and experimentation, which at that time I felt was missing from my practice.
Meanwhile, I was also really questioning and reimagining my creative voice and intents. I went through a phase of unlearning where I started to just really address negative industry standards that had influenced me. I began a project where I kept a pen or pencil on me, as well as a multitude of quickly made palm-sized sketchbooks, like shown. And I would just kind of draw wherever I was. I employed a mix of observational, blind contour, and automatic drawing that obsessed over the liminal. And at this time, it was really exciting because I was drawing and making more than I ever had in quite some time. And this new intent and ritual really helped propel me towards our eventual collaboration.
So the collaboration initially came from this place of like, Jade, you have all of this imagery that I really love and that we both want to see on a bigger scale and that we want other people to be able to see as finished work. And I have all this time in my practice right now and a desire to grow these specific technical skills. We both knew that there is a long history of printmakers using illustrators' images, so we felt that this collaboration would be working in a facet of visual culture that neither of us had explored very much before. So we just thought, let's try this, let's do it and see what happens. Together, we started going through Jade's sketchbooks and flagged images that we felt were promising, which I would then edition as screen prints. And for me, it really started as a technical exercise in processing files, exposing screens, registration, layering, and being free to think about color and shape.
And for me, it really became an exercise in sort of reconsidering what finished work might look like for me. It definitely involved a level of disassociation from previous expectations or limitations I had put on my projects. And this was really exciting and rewarding, just to make for the sake of making and choose things that we thought were sweet or funny or just really nasty.
Over time, the nature of our collaboration evolved. I started thinking about the limitations and benefits of working with a limited color palette, how shape and color can add drama or relevance to line. We also both started thinking about how working in a series united by colors and style can contribute to a sense of world building or atmosphere that otherwise existed only in the sketchbook. We started playing more with things like repeating and arranging images to build more complicated meanings, like this piece that mirrors Jade's same drawing of thistles to connect the plants at the root and visually signal the idea of co-development, which for us was really that idea that people grow and blossom in tandem with each other, be it in collaboration, community, or relationships of all kinds. Or this piece about sameness and loving relationships, where we considered the way that increasing the scale from 3 by 5 inches to 18 by 24 inches caused the image to lose some sense of precious intimacy, but gain in its ability to address the viewer on a bodily scale.
So we really played with this collaboration when we were in between other projects. So it was fairly on and off for a little over a year. And at the end of 2018, I was working on this series of sketches and paintings about the body experience. This project consisted of blobby forms that hinted at notions of the body, internal, external, and imagined. I started calling these forms queer masses. This series overlapped with our deeper dives into queer spaces and the queer expression of self, as both of us continue to question gender on a social and personal scale.
We both thought that, unlike some of the other works that we had hitherto collaborated on, these images functioned best and gained the most meaning when viewed in an intentional sequence because of the way that they build off of each other. And around the same time, I had a piece of writing that was also about the body as a liminal space that we felt could add even more specific context to the images as well. Also around this time, I had a residency, which gave me access to a risograph printer, which is a kind of cross between a photocopier and an offset printer that utilizes an ink drum. It's a way of producing prints with a similar tactility to screen prints, but at an extremely quick pace and high volume, and very cheaply. The result of all of these different things coming together was this zine, a poem for this frontier of language. Using Jade's queer masses drawings and my piece of writing, this zine addresses our personal body feels at the time and our mutual transitions to using the singular they, them, their pronouns. The title comes from our experience of asking to be called these pronouns in various private and public spaces and the resulting negative response that we got from a high number of people. It was our feeling that this request to be respected linguistically scared, confused, or angered some people because it pushes at the edge of what society is used to considering describable through language. In this scene, we consider ourselves as beings whose bodies overlap multiple dimensions, continuously and joyfully expanding to fill a limitless selfhood.
So this scene served as a sort of issue zero for our project of 4 interconnected artist scenes that we ended up proposing to the MCBA Jerome Fellowship Program. And that brings us to what we're working on today.
So by mid-2019, we knew that we wanted to continue to use the book as a narrative structure and collaborate on work that explores queer subjectivity. We were interested in the ways that producing an edition work about the subject matter and working in the multiple could bring us closer to and tighten our commitment to the queer community.
The idea of distributing among and engaging with a group became central to our goals. We thought it would be fitting to carry over the name of queer masses with the intention that masses would come to signal throngs of people rather than collective bodily forms or religious masses.
In our planning, we started by setting a couple of parameters and goals for ourselves. We knew that we wanted to produce books that were closer to the price point of zines, but that tapped into considerations usually reserved for the fine press. We understood this to mean that they would be well considered as physical objects and utilize traditional book techniques in a way that was conceptually important, while also welcoming in new print technology as a tool rather than seeing it as a threat.
It was important to us that the content, structures, and materials of the books be intimately linked. We wanted to centralize the reader's body and bodily interaction with the piece.
We wanted the 4 books to tell an overarching story, but also be self-contained standalone narratives.
We also really wanted to celebrate queerness, queer joy, and queer power in a way that acknowledges the suffering and difference without taking those things as the sum of lived queer experience.
Finally, we wanted to include distribution as a part of the project because that is the way that the book as an art form is activated, by being held and read. And it's the way that the book as an art form will stay relevant in an increasingly digitized world.
Those are the guidelines that we set for ourselves as we started developing Queer Masses as a quarterly issued zine for this fellowship. There are 4 books in the series. Each features original writing by Sarah and illustrations by myself. Thematically, they tell the story that moves from issue 1's opposition to issue 4's independence, traveling through issue 2's comfort and issue 3's sameness along the way.
For cost effectiveness, each book is primarily risograph printed with letterpressed detailing on the covers, and each book uses a different structure that thematically dovetails with the subject matter, written poems, and illustrations. So for example, the first in the series is Opposition. And like we said before, so much has been written and produced dealing with the crippling oppression that queer people of all kinds have dealt with historically and continue to suffer today. Rather than continuing in this vein, we decided that we wanted to focus on the equally true fact that queer people historically and presently oppose and serve as active antagonists to those structures and systems that wish to eradicate us. And I picked this finding for this volume because for those of you at home who are book nerds, I would describe it as a soft cover cased in accordion. And I picked that because the harshness of the cover and the springiness of the folded text block are in active conflict. And this finding also allows for the text block to be expanded beyond the confines of its original structure into a freestanding space. The book creates its own room and has a fire in its belly, phrases that probably sound familiar to anyone who is living in a body or a life world that is outside of the societal norm.
So the second issue, which we are preparing to distribute this June, revolves around the idea of comfort and healing. The structure includes a lot of hidden foldouts for the reader to discover as they gently navigate the visual and written narrative. After being read, the book is folded or cuddled back up into a secure state in a sort of papery swaddling gesture. The centerfold expands into this poster, which we consider a deep breath in the center of the volume that the book and the reader get to take together.
We are currently working on developing the 3rd issue, Sameness, shown here in mock-up state. This issue uses a double pamphlet stitch to position 2 text blocks in an attitude of mirroring one another. We both see sameness as being the trait that is at the root of queer relationships, but we are also interested in exploring what might define a same-sex relationship in an era where ideas of gender and gender identity are increasingly liberated from body parts.
When we were exploring this concept, we were really drawn to the idea of expansiveness and moving beyond long-held boundaries. This led us to imagery reflecting upon the mythic, the ever-expanding universe, and a queer cosmos that encompasses both those who came before us and those who will come after us. Lastly, issue 4, Independence, is currently under development. It will feature a text block that can be fully removed from its cover in order to stand upright on its own strength. The imagery will tie together the art of all 3 previous books. So because we do not have anything visual to share about this book, Sarah will now read the text of issue 4, Independence.
So here is the text. Creature, to be a lover in our way is to be a fighter also, to face again the salt, the sweat, and rise again victorious as winged horse from the Gorgon. We myth folk, beautiful, impossible, our bodies ungrammared, unlanguaged, are marks of a changing world, proof of that dying monster. The state we presage, the space we make ourselves, self-sovereign is the place of knowing that in the being is always the becoming, that the never arriving is the always coming home. So praise this difference as creative, the source of great wieldable power. Accept the struggle, meet it facing forward, unaframed and unashamed. Overcome without becoming, persist not in winning their game, where the reward is a prison, the reward is a chain, the reward is to deny others as once you were denied, and be the capstone of that building founded in your own subjugation. In that game, winning feels too much like losing. So keep playing, but play elsewhere and to a different goal. My friend, myself, my lover, my fighter, throw down your arms and embrace me, then throw up your arms to rejoice. Stand in your own height, your own self-power, upon the base of your strong, sure feet, flanked by others also othered. Shining, flaming, rising with the burn, remember this through all, that when you claim yourself as center, the center cannot move.
All right.
Thank you. Oh, I lost my place. So the final part of our project, like we mentioned before, is distribution. And as a book artist, and I did say this already in the presentation, but as a book artist, I really believe that if the book as a form is to survive in this present exciting era of print and digital technology, both accessibility and distribution are key to it remaining relevant. Our original plan in fall of 2019 was to distribute this project at zine fairs, bookstores across the Midwest, and print conventions. We felt that this would give the project life and also be a way for us to connect with other queer people face to face. However, the state of Minnesota shut down due to COVID-19 the week after we finished issue 1, which forced us to rethink.
Because of the constrictions of quarantine life, we shifted instead to a sent by mail artist book subscription service. So anyone who subscribes gets a quarterly mailing of books and flair at the price of $30 per book mailing, including postage. The first issue shipped in March, but if you are interested in subscribing, issue 2 ships out in June, and any new subscribers between now and then will get the first 2 books at that time. We will put the link to that in chat later.
And at this time, we are also reaching out to libraries and other public institutions that have zine collections or artist book collections as part of our distribution plan in an effort to provide additional avenues to access the work for those who cannot or do not want to purchase it.
Again, thank you all so much for being present here tonight. We've really been looking forward to this, and we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts and questions after Austin and Shun's presentations, which we are really excited about. Back to you, Tori. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you both so much for that wonderful presentation. I'm still thinking of the never arriving is always coming, the coming home, and that was so beautiful. Thank you for reading that. And oh, there we go. All right, so on to the next. I'm so excited for you all to see Austin Nash's presentation. Austin is a designer and printmaker who creates screen prints that examine mood, tone, rhythm of color, exploring visual and verbal language of color and emotion. Austin.
I think, okay. Can you guys see me?
We can see you. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Awesome. So yeah, hello. Trying to make sure it goes full screen. Oh, cool. So yeah, so as Tori said, my name is Austin Nash. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a local designer and printmaker based in Minneapolis. I wanted to just start out by thanking the Jerome Foundation. This has been an amazing opportunity, and it's led to a lot of great and exciting work. But I also wanted to thank MCBA just as a space. Even beforehand, I was a co-op member, and it was so welcoming and allowing me to work on projects and kind of grow and develop from those who were there. I also wanted to thank Tori Aaron. Tori has been incredible to work with. She's super flexible and just generating ideas, and just seeing her energy and passion for this work has been super cool. Okay. And then I also wanted to thank all of the other fellows, my fellow fellows. They've been amazing just in terms of asking questions and generating ideas for how the work can kind of show up in the actual exhibition, which I've really appreciated. And then also I just wanted to thank all the people who I haven't thanked yet, but will continue to kind of throughout the presentation, as well as everyone who's here on the call tonight. And that includes one, Bill Moran and Monica Edwards-Larson over at Hamilton Ink Spot. I went to the University of St. Thomas and actually got a degree in business administration with a focus on entrepreneurship. So nothing to do with printmaking or design, but InkSpot was really the space that welcomed me in and taught me about letterpress and screen printing. And through the co-op members and the fellow interns, including Sarah, I really got to kind of develop my ideas there and see it in kind of the commercial context, which was really valuable. And it was an amazing experience. This is one of the first kind of prints I came up with. I think we just had a flyer that we needed to send out for, and I just remember coming up with I ink, therefore I am, and I think I printed it like 10 different times in all these variations. And then the background is just the actual Hamilton Ink Spot address. But I played around a ton. This is a piece for a Halloween exhibition. And basically I took a bunch of broken wood type and just brought it back together to make this composite self-portrait, as it were.
Hey, Austin, I'm just going to interrupt you for a moment because we're not seeing your slides. So I'm wondering if you
really?
could, yeah, I'm so
What
sorry. So I'm wondering if you could stop screen sharing and then we'll try it again to see if that works.
What were you guys seeing that whole time? My face?
We're seeing your lovely face.
Oh God. The passion of it.
It's all right. It's all right.
Oh, that's true. It is all right.
Yay, we can see it now. Thanks so much.
Oh, no, thank you. I mean, that was literally, there was 30 more minutes of that. So proud of y'all though. Cool. So this is just the I ink, therefore I am example. And then the self-portrait one. And then getting in, I started doing kind of pressure printing. And so again, it was working with wood type, but then doing these kind of additional layers to remove ink at different levels and different spaces. And there was something about working with materials in both of these prints that was really exciting. And this was the first full out series where it was kind of 26 prints that I had to plan forward with. And it was fun just to kind of go around the shop and find different pieces of wood type that I kind of work with, print, and then react to that, to the actual form that was being printed. And then later on, I started to get into laser cutting. So the Hamilton Wood Type Museum in Two Rivers, Wisconsin was producing a lot of wood type, and obviously I was surrounded by wood type there. So I wanted to start kind of making my own tools and being able to create this modular system that I could play around with. So I created a set of, I think it was maybe, it must have been like 12 blocks total. 6 of patterns and then 6 of type that I could just kind of rearrange over and over again. And I've done that again, just in terms of acrylic type and that sort of thing, but this was just good old fashioned MDF. And then it wasn't until wordplay. So this was at MCBA, and this is a really good example of getting, just really awesome opportunities. They reached out for playing with words and actually being able to do a poetry broadside, which is something I'd seen a ton at InkSpot through Monica and kind of her experience working with poets. And I think at one point I had attempted I've Known Rivers, but this was kind of the first opportunity for me to make one that was going to show in a space. And so I was paired with Natasha Tretherway, who is kind of a major poet. She was the poet laureate of the United States as well as Mississippi, very much a Southern poet and a poet of color, and specifically mixed race. So for me, it was a really easy way into the poetry and actually being able to see myself in that work. And there were a number of poems that I would have been very, very happy to get to work on. But I ended up choosing Monument, mainly because it was the title poem of the collection, but also because I kind of could grab onto the main image of that. So basically the main image of the poem is this red and humming swarm on top of a grave. And this is a very kind of oversimplification, but I was really drawn to that and figuring out a good way to create that through material, kind of pointing back to the self-portrait or even the pressure printing. So in this case, I actually used type from a hell box. And so I should thank John Drew because it was his type that he lent me. But basically type from a hell box is type that's been thrown away and discarded. It's been dinged up, it's been damaged, something has happened that the face of it really can't produce a good impression, and therefore it's really just meant to be melted down. And so I like the idea of taking those pieces that were otherwise dead and flipping them upside down. And so they were all kind of turned into one typeface that was the underside, and there would be a little bit of a detail there. And the next piece was to figure out, I've got these bits that felt like they were coming from the grave, but what if, how do I get them to swarm? And so for that, I actually ended up going back to laser cutting and specifically using bookboard and cutting out every single position for every single piece. And that was just a cool example of working back and forth between Illustrator and then onto, the actual press and seeing what works and what made sense. And then just finally bearing it on and running it through. And then the second kind of poetry broadside that I got to do was for Harvey Hicks. He was through the Midwest 100. And basically that poem, it talks a lot about this sense of counting, but I grabbed this one particular line that I liked. So I hear more trains than I see, so I can't count coal cars. I only count how few trains trestle past. And so I like that sense of sound and the sense of counting, and I wanted to combine those through this tally mark. And so what I did is I literally took strips of double-sided tape, line by line, and I still thought of it like laying out type, just with these broken pieces of toothpick, and hoping I could get some of the grain actually put in. And then it was just a matter of getting the right amount of pressure. So you ended up getting this certain kind of noise that didn't completely disrupt or disform, I guess disform, maybe that's a word, the type, but also gave this kind of almost a hum in the background or a whisper of something being tallied, something being counted as it trestled past. And so then this brings me to the Threshold Gallery at High Point. I got to intern at High Point, I think in 2016. And again, another amazing space that really welcomed me and kind of invited me to make. But this is the back gallery. And every now and then they'll allow, or I guess periodically they'll have co-op members put up work in that space. And this was the first time I really got to react to something entirely being my work. Typically, you're in an exhibition with a lot of other pieces. But in this one, it was just kind of my work in the space. So I wanted it to be kind of a way of inviting folks into the print shop but then work that was in relation to itself. So thinking of it like lines of a poem. And this is really what ended up leading to the Jerome Fellowship and the work I'm doing now. And so basically I think of these colors, each one being kind of like an emotion or a tone, and that can then be blended into the next. And so you can be going through all these different kind of emotions or spaces. And I think space is probably, well, maybe relationship actually is the way I would say it best. When I'm actually on the screen, and you'll see this a little bit later, I'm initially starting out with something that's very binary in the sense that I have, in the case of this pink and yellow, I just select a very specific pink and a very specific yellow, and that first pull could be very defined. Like the border, the definition between those two colors is very clear. But as I continue working and kind of sculpting the color, there's this space that opens up between those and this continuum of color that I never really considered or thought about, but was always there from the very beginning. And so for me, each one of these prints explores what that space looks like for any number of colors. And then as you start putting them one next to the other, they start to kind of get into this conversation with each other. So that alone, I absolutely loved. And then there were all these other ways kind of into the work, even in terms of the history of color and how we use color as signifiers or ways of defining things. And so between that and just the relationship of space, I was excited to figure out ways of putting text to this that could possibly define this, or better yet, actually complicate the work. And so this is just an example of how you can see how some of the blends are just super, super smooth, and then other ones have more of a vibration in between. And so my initial exploration after that was really asking the idea of, okay, what are different ways I can actually move that color then? And so this initial one was literally taking a single bar or a single line and printing it over again 6 different times, or in this case, I think it ended up being like 12. But you can kind of see how I could get this color to move in kind of a non-linear way and almost feel like a chorus or something that was singing or had that sort of effect. I also wanted to take what I would think of as more of a commercial approach, or maybe a manufactured, in the sense that I used a halftone. And so halftones are used throughout packaging, throughout any sort of promotional material. It's very commercial screen print. And in that way, it's very kind of production-y, and also it's not extremely flexible. Basically, this is 2 layers. It's a green and then a blue on top of that. And it gets you this kind of gradation, as you see, that it transfers, but I can print this 100 times, 1,000 times, and it's never going to change. It's always going to be in that form. And I wanted to get into a kind of a flexible system where I could actually make the image on the screen, and that was really the goal. And so that took me to Rainbow Pull. So this is a screen print that I'm technically, I mean, truly in the sense of technically, very proud of. Because it erases any sense of border, any sense of that definition, other than obviously the edge of the work. The colors, blue, green, yellow, and red blend into each other, in kind of a perfectly smooth way. And that was because I was actually able to curve the pull. And by doing that, breaking away from a linear kind of pull or just a straightforward pull, I was able to then blend it in all sorts of ways. And so this is kind of what then set off the next bit of work. So you can see how I keep kind of playing around with the pulls and how I can kind of use different effects. I mean, there's a lot of kind of gestalt and whatnot going on here. But just seeing the different spaces in between of hues and glows, but then how they could lead into each other. And then that led into pull. And pull was a breakthrough in the sense that I discovered the screen has a memory. From one pull to the next, it still holds, physically holds some bit of pigment in the screen, and that you could actually pull that into the next print over and over again, building up these kind of short narratives. So these short series of 4 or so poems. And for me, in terms of connecting it with poetry, it felt that memory would end up being the best approach in thinking about, oh, how can I get memories into the screen, and then how can I pull them back out? And so I just want to give you a sense of what else is happening here from a, I guess, production standpoint. For every single poll that you're going to see after this, I'm literally using this screen. It's one single screen. And you'll see the variety of polls you're able to get out of that. And basically with this one screen, I'm using a technique called the split fountain. So taking two inks and blending them together. And these are literally the dropper bottles I use to put ink, exactly where I need it or exactly as I want it, to be able to create these gradient blends. And so this is actually an example of what one of those might look like. So basically just blending a black into a white and then out again. And in this case, it made a very, defined mark there, but you can already see that the ghost starting to kind of line the background. And so this is a continuation of the series as I've been exploring. And again, moving from something that feels more, detailed or even, I guess in the sense of figurative, I would say, like bones being looked at or something like that, or to either like a detail of something pulling away to something that's very sculptural, just the play of light on the edge of a surface. They seem all like very close-up shots of those moments happening. And the fact that I'm getting all of these types of images and all this play of color with literally a single screen and just my own ability and, to pull and to understand what's happening in that space is really exciting for me. And feels more like what's happening when you're writing and you're working with language, is the way that I feel like I'm working with color. And so I began to scan these in and do kind of pulls consecutively over and over to see how long I could hold these narratives for. And that led into revision. So revision is actually a projection. It's an animation of scans of screen prints over and over again. And in a way, it reanimates the pull, reanimates just the motion of what I'm doing. And so it's shown here at Mirror Lab, and it's shown in a few other spaces in the Twin Cities, as well as I think over the summer it'll be at the International Print Center in New York, which I'm super excited about. And so kind of moving into the next bit, I've started to think more in terms of memory and just translucency and transparency, and actually printing on vellum or dendril. And that's kind of had two interesting effects. The first one is its transparency, the fact you could layer multiple ones over each other again and again. And the other bit is it actually doesn't accept the ink. Like, it doesn't take it into the fibers because it's not fibers, it's more of kind of a plasticky material. And so because of that, there's ways of editing the prints even after they're on the page, and then being able to rework them again and again. Through just different kind of markings and that sort of thing. And so this is the work that's going to then be used as prompts for poetry over the summer. And so that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, so I just want to, I guess, yeah, thank you. But yeah.
Thanks so much, Austin, for sharing your practice with us and your journey into color and memory.
No.
I'd like to welcome Shun Jie Yong, a portrait photographer, papermaker who documents immigrants and refugees in the United States and Malaysia. Shun documents and archives immigrants in their work environments in order to share stories, connect communities, and provide a sense of belonging for himself. Thanks, Shun. Looking forward to your presentation.
First of all, I would like to say thank you to MCBA, Jerome Foundation, and Tori for the support. And I'm going to introduce myself. So I am a portrait photographer, a papermaker, a second-generation Chinese in Malaysia, and also a permanent resident in the United States. And I have lots of identity. And I'm going to talk about my current project, including occupation, carry on homes, C-H-F. I'm going to talk about carry on homes and CHF first. I will talk about that briefly, and I will leave occupation at the end of the presentation. So carry on homes is a collective of 3. The artists including Zoe Chanel, Peng Wu, and I. Peng and I co-founded Carry On Homes back in 2017. Our goals are storytelling, creating spaces for immigrants and communities in Twin Cities. And now we are focusing on curating photo story exhibition around Minnesota. The photograph on the left are the sculpture that the collective built back in 2018, and it is commissioned by the city of Minneapolis, and we installed that at Commons by Minneapolis. And the sculpture had been traveling to few cities, and now it is gone. My main role in Carry On Homes is photographer. Peng and I invited our immigrant friends to my studio. We asked our immigrant friends to bring along the object that they brought to the United States, and we take photo of our friends with the object. After the photo session, we conduct interview, like to ask our immigrant friends question what the object means to them and how the object helped them get through their difficult times in the United States. So the next 2 slides will be the photograph that I did for Carry On Homes. And right now we have 45 participants in the story. And you could go to carryonhomes.com to check the audio story and photo story. Right now, we also working with Iraqi American Reconciliation Project to get more photo story from their communities. So with Carry On Homes, I learned how to collaborate with different artists and learn how to be a builder. I also learned how to work with the local communities to create interactive work for immigrants and the communities. And C-H-F is my personal project. It's about climbing. So I started to climb back in 2020 September. I get so into climbing because it helped me soothe my anxiety. Like when I get to the top, I feel happy and tend to focus more on climbing and not to overthink any negative things. So after a few months, I find out that my hand and my toes develop some calluses. So I think it might be a good time to document how my hand and my feet change. And I also invited more climbers to take part in my photo project. And these 2 photographs are just a teaser, and I will add more photographs to my website in Instagram probably next week or 2 weeks later. And I'm going to talk about occupation now. So occupation is my main personal project. Occupations mean jobs. The documentation takes place in Malaysia and in the United States. It consists portraits of immigrant workers as well as landscape photo of their workplaces. The landscape allows viewers to learn more about their workplaces. And I talk about 35 subjects at their workplace, and the number is growing. Through making portraits of immigrants, I get to know their story, and I found myself to be experiencing a very similar journey to them. We are all adapting ourselves in the new country that we call home. So some of these subjects are my immigrant friends. Some of the subject are the stranger that I met in daily life. And by documenting these people, they help me to achieve a sense of belonging in the home called United States. And occupation series started back in Malaysia. And while I was searching my identity back in Malaysia in 2016, because I wanted to find out why my ancestor left China and moved to Malaysia. So by doing research, I find out that my grandparents were brought to Malaysia by the British to work in the rubber plantation. And now the rubber plantation were given to my grandparents and passed to my cousin. And the first photograph for my occupation series is my cousin in the rubber plantation. And photograph on the right is the rubber tree. And now part of the rubber plantation became a fruit plantation. So after taking photo of my cousin in the rubber plantation, I took photo of my uncle in the fruit plantation. Basically, I spent my childhood time in that two places. And the photograph on the right is Pasar. Pasar means bazaars. And it also means a grocery store in Malaysia. It's more like a co-op style for a small village. I'm surprised that Pasar still exists in Malaysia because in 2015, the government in Malaysia trying to apply more taxes on the co-ops, and then most of the Pasar had been running out of business. And my mom used to work in Pasar, and I spent my childhood in Pasar. So I feel like it's important to documenting these places. And the lady in the photograph is Ling. She is the vegetable store owner. And these two ladies, they does not work in the Pasar, but they just came to Pasar to social and to help out. That's how the village people spend their morning in the small town. So it's difficult for me to imagine when the Pasar is running out of business and where the people going to social and talk to each others. For these two photographs, they are immigrant worker in Malaysia. I find myself related to them. So I talk to their manager and says, hey, could I take photograph of your worker? I find myself related to them because I'm immigrant worker in the United States. And they have to learn how to speak Malay in order to work in Malaysia, just like me. I mean, I have to at least to know how to speak English to work in the United States. The photograph on the left is Harun, he's construction worker. And the photograph on the right is Bairi, and he is a warehouse worker. So I find that we don't have any gap while chatting with each other because we speak the same language, even though we are all different nationality. Photograph on the left is Jihae. She is a Korean and she works in a Korean immersion school located at St. Paul. She is shy when I take photograph of her, and she kind of told me that could you come back the next day and take photo of me because I'm not ready and I don't have my makeup on. I kind of told her that no, I would like to take photo of you today because I like to visit my subject unannounced or giving them a short time. Like they don't have time to prepare, so they don't have time to clean up their workplaces. So that my photograph kind of show the authenticity of their like the original scene of their workplace. And the photograph on the right is Aki. She is a great community leader in Frog Town, and she used to work in Science Museum, and now she works in MCAT as a professor. And I still connect with Aki, so I plan to take photo of her working as a professor at MCAT. So the photograph on the left is Jihae. I get to meet him while eating in his restaurant, and I shamelessly asked him if I could take his photo, and he said yes. And I'm glad that he's willing to take part in my project. The person on the right is Alex. He is a lawyer, and he worked for his community. And I'm happy that he was helping me to notarize my document and send back to Malaysia. And I'm also happy that he's willing to be part of my subject in my project. For these two subjects, I get to meet them while I was rock climbing. I find myself like I related myself with them because on how we apply to be a citizen or permanent resident in the United States, and we went through the same process, so that I find myself relate to them a lot. Just that they are more like a scientist and I'm more like an artist. So that's the only difference that I find myself with them compared to them. And this is the behind the scene of me taking portrait of one of my subjects. And I'm happy that because they are willing to give me a spare time to visit them at their workplace and take photo of them. And sometimes it is challenging because I have to write out an email and send to their employer and wait for reply. Sometimes it might take me a month to 2 months to get approval to take their photograph. And sometimes I have to went through background check in order to go to their workplaces. But I mean, at least I get to take their photograph. So my work for MCBA Jerome Foundation exhibition consists 3 components. The first component is paper making. The second component is photo taking. And the third component is audio recording. I collect unused paper from subject workplaces to create papers. And then I will use the paper to make a sleeve to cover up the photograph. So here is a mock-up on how the photograph going to be inserted into the sleeve. So the sleeve is actually represent their workplaces. Like it is just like a wall, and we don't see immigrant worker at their workplaces. And the sleeve also a personal, that means like something like the sleeve is so personal to my subject and myself because it is something that I collected from their workplaces and created to be a new things to hold the photograph. And then I will conduct interview before or after the photo shoot. I will transcribe the audio interview and later press on the sleeve. The reason why I'm doing so is because I observe that people always view my photograph without knowing the story. Now I want to change the viewing experience by insert the photograph into the sleeve so people can read the story first and imagine who are the subject. And then they pull out the photo and look at the subject later. And I plan to have 15 to 20 photograph or photo story in the exhibition. Because of that, people might not have time to read all the story. So I think about doing the audio recording. So I will upload the audio recording to my website and also fill up their story on the website, including their photo. So people can scan the QR code on the label and listen to the story again. because they might not have time to read 20 stories in the exhibition. So that's all about my presentation, and thanks.
Thank you so much, Shun. It's so beautiful to see you create community through your work. Now I'd like to invite Austin, Sarah, and Jade, and Shun to join me in a Q&A. I would also like to invite the audience to put any questions that they have in the chat at this time. Thank you all. You did such a wonderful job. The first thing, I guess,
Yes, good job.
I have a couple of questions. I guess the first thing that I would like to talk about a little bit is your experience and making through the past year through COVID-19, and in Austin in particular. I'm wondering if you could share with everyone about your ritual that you had.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So it's the black and white pieces of revision. So basically starting March 11th, I started a daily practice of doing those polls on that one screen. So basically just taking time every day to just pull, to pour ink onto the screen and to pull a print and to have that one sort of thing that you could hold on to amongst all of the chaos and changing world. There was this, work or this print that had to be made. So for me, it was a way of holding on and a way of meditating kind of through all of it. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you for sharing that daily practice and play. Shun, maybe you can talk to or tell everyone about your some trials that you came against with photographing some of your subjects throughout the past year as well.
It was difficult during the pandemic times because I cannot meet anyone to take photographs. And also they are not working at the office, and there are lots of challenges trying to go to people's house and take their photograph, but it does not work. The only way to work is I stand outside their house and they stay inside the house. We do the audio recording first. And then it's like, there's a long distance that we have to do the audio recording and practice distancing each other. Actually the door is closed, but we have to scream and ask the question. That one time we are doing that. And it's just tough, but I'm glad that with the vaccination now I could take more photographs. I find it more difficult than waiting for background check. Yeah, but now it's easier for me to photograph people again. Yeah.
I'm so glad that it's getting easier for you to photograph your subjects. And I also really appreciate the image of standing apart from one another, sort of yelling, your story. There's no other time I think that would really happen, right? That that kind of engagement would happen. So yeah, thank you for sharing and also for being so resilient during, and continuing to make your work throughout the past year. I think I sense a lot of community building in your work as well, Shun, and I'm wondering if you could, I'm wondering if you have kept in contact with your subjects throughout.
Yes, I did. Most of my contact, I still connect with them, and some of them became my good friends. So I mean, I'm glad that I get to meet them because I used to think about I was alone and by myself, and there are no people just same like me. Like, I mean, actually, there are lots of people like me, and because of that project, I found the community, and I also found the people struggle like me. So I'm hoping to use a photo story to help them get through difficult times.
That's very special. Thank you. It looks like we have a question in the chat. Gabrielle Civil to everyone says, thanks everyone for such inspiring presentations. I was curious about Rumtum's Queer Masses zine series. How many are you making? Is it a limited edition? And do you imagine continuing the multi-volume book series in future years? That's a great question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. So we print about 120 of them, and then the formal edition is at 80 right now. So we have several like artist proofs and everything after that as well. Right now it is limited just because we can only print so many on the risograph and then also letterpress them. But we've talked about expanding the project to have like either a digital component or a digitally printed component for additional access, or possibly continuing the series after the 4 are done. But
yeah, and a lot of the what we earn from this series too will go towards hopefully making more projects like this as well.
right now the focus is just to finish the 4 that we have planned. And that kind of brings me to think about like the previous question, which is that the way that our practice changed from having COVID was that instead of having to produce and distribute 4 zines in 1 year, we really like the timeline got really, really decompressed in a way that I think really benefited the work and also us, and allowed us to spend a lot more time in research and sketch and development phases.
Yeah, and we're both kind of excited too once things start to open up and maybe conventions happen again, that we can, you know, go out and engage with the community in that way too. So yeah, we're gonna kind of like feel it out, do what we've set out to do, and then maybe expand from there probably.
Yeah, and I think we also both wrestle with this idea of the book as a commercial object, because the history of the book is very much the history of commerce, and to a degree the history of capitalist distribution. And so we're also thinking about ways that future projects that we might collaborate on that involve distribution could break from those systems in a more active way than what we've done here, since we are selling them. So
yeah, totally.
Lots to think about.
Yes. Thank you
There's
for your question.
There's such a beautiful intimacy that the two of you have created with your viewers by sending mail in you know, design packages. Yeah, the post office, the mail, the form of connection through mail has been you know, really amazing and expanding for a lot of people throughout this time. So if there are no other questions from the audience, I would just like to thank everyone so much for being here, and thank you so much to all of the fellows for their thorough and thoughtful presentations this evening. And again, we really look forward to hosting this work in person. Oh, it looks like we have another question. Sorry. Okay, so Shun, thank you for sharing your project occupations. It looks so rich and I would love to see more. Do you have any plans to show the series anywhere? That's a great question.
Right now I will work on my website, so probably you could see more on my website. And yeah, and I'm trying to connect with people in some gallery in Chicago. I'm not sure if I get to show in Chicago or not, but finger crossed. Yeah. But definitely I will upload those photos to my website soon.
Thank you so much. It's really a beautiful series. And also I'm really looking forward to hearing your subjects speak for themselves in their own voices. And I think that there's sort of a magic moment in having the letterpress, handmade paper with letterpress over the portrait, as like your background is in photography, you're covering up, the visual information, and really allowing the viewer to listen, which I think is such an important thing to do in this time. So again, I would like to thank everyone for being here, and we really look forward to hosting all of these artists at MCBA in the coming fall. And we hope that you can come and also follow them along and support their work. Yeah, more information can be found at mnbookarts.org. So thank you so much.